Go.
Good evening and good morning, and welcome to a brand new podcast from D Life. My name is Anjali, and I'm a low carb nutritionist. I also volunteer in the D Life community. D Life is the only Indian award winning LCHF and keto community striving to help as many Indians as possible to reverse their diabetes and overcome metabolic disorders. You can read more or join the community via www.dlife.in. Apart from being a community, D-Life also has a diploma course on low carb nutrition for those who are looking to pursue their specialization in the low carb nutrition field. This diploma is the only legally tenable low carb course in India. The points discussed here are not to be construed or taken as a substitute for medical advice. In case you wish to switch to a low carb dietary approach, we recommend that you go under the guidance of your doctor or with a certified low carb nutritionist. We'd also like to add another disclaimer that these podcasts are done voluntarily for educative purposes and do not have any financials attached to it. So, going to today's podcast, our guest today is Amy Berger. Amy Berger, MS CNS, is a US Air Force veteran and certified nutrition specialist who specializes in helping people do keto without the crazy. She has a master's degree in human nutrition and writes about a wide range of health and nutrition related topics such as insulin, metabolism, weight loss, diabetes, thyroid function, and more. She has presented internationally on these issues and is the author of the Alzheimer's Antidote, The Stall Slayer, and End Your Carb Confusion. Welcome, Amy. We are excited to have you on our show once again.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And thank you to everyone who's watching live right now.
So, Amy, we see that you are a veteran. Very, very interesting to see that. Can you help us with a little bit more about your background and how you got into nutrition? What interested you into nutrition?
Sure. I I got into low carb and ketogenic eating the way a lot of people do. I used to be heavier than I am now. I was carrying excess weight. And I was heavier despite doing what I thought were the right things. I was exercising plenty. I was eating a low fat diet, lots of whole grains, margarine, all of that. And the weight would not budge no matter how hard I worked. And I found the Atkins diet. That was how I got into all this, was via the Atkins method. And it worked. And it was very different from what I was used to doing and from what I was used to hearing about a healthy diet and how to lose weight. But in reading the book, it just made sense. The way that Dr. Atkins really explained everything, it made sense. So I was willing to try it. And I was just so fascinated about why is this working? I'm doing the opposite of what I'm supposed to do, and it's working. And so I just read more books about it, started to read some of the scientific papers to the extent that I could understand them at the time. And then I went back to graduate school for nutrition because I had been in and out of some jobs that I just did not enjoy and didn't find fulfilling. And I realized that, as you know, nutrition is a career. Like, I could go back for formal education in this and help other people learn about low carb. So that's what I do now. And even though I got started in this from weight loss, I've come to appreciate that this way of eating, whether it's keto or some variation of lower carbohydrate eating, is so powerful for so many other things, for so many health issues, that weight loss is one of the smallest things that this can do for you. I mean, you can reverse type 2 diabetes, you can improve PCOS, gout, hypertension, migraines. So many health issues get so much better when you cut the carbs out of your diet.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think a lot of us in the community has experienced that. But a little bit more about a low carb. How did you realize that you're losing so much of weight? Were you able to figure out why that happens?
At the time, I didn't really know. I just knew that it was working, because this is maybe almost 20 years ago. I've been eating this way for a long time. Um, I don't know if I really understood why it was working then. I just knew it was working. Now, of course, I know that some of us are just very sensitive to carbohydrate, and not everybody needs a low carb or ketogenic diet. But some of us, when we eat carbohydrate foods, even the foods that we would consider wholesome, healthy foods, like potatoes or rice or naan, or these chickpeas, different beans, we might have a much, much bigger effect on our blood sugar and insulin compared to somebody else. And those of us that have these big responses really have to go much lower on the carbs, because the human body can run on a lot of different kinds of fuel. It's never completely 100% one thing or the other. But when you are eating a lot of carbohydrate, just the way the body works, you are going to use and metabolize primarily the carbohydrate. So if you want to lose body fat, you have to switch your body over to burning fat. And the main way to do that is to not give it the option to burn carbs. So when you don't have carbs coming in, the body says, oh, I have to find some other fuel. What am I going to do? Oh, look at all this great body fat I have to burn instead. I'll switch over to burning fat. So now I know that it's one of the ways that low carb works. And what I've always loved about this way of eating is that you can be successful, whether that means losing weight or lowering your blood sugar, blood pressure, all those other things, without starving. You still get to enjoy really delicious food. And you do have to avoid some things that might be some of our favorite foods. But if you can do that, you can be really healthy and get the results you want. And you don't have to be hungry all the time. You don't have to get cranky and irritable. You can enjoy good food.
Absolutely. So while you're saying that with the low carb and keto, we start overall the people who get onto it, they start seeing a lot of weight loss. And initially, for many of them, it's a rapid weight loss. There are so many people who are on keto who kind of rapidly start losing a lot of weight. But come one particular time, I'm sure everybody would have actually gone to that phase where they would immediately say the scales are not moving. I haven't seen even a few grams of weight getting out in the past 2 3 months. So there's a stall, and you are now a specialist on stalls. So maybe you could help us break this and help us understand what this is all about. Is it really a stall and all of that?
Right. That's the best question to ask. Is it really a stall? Because when you're brand new to lower carb eating, most people will lose a lot of weight rapidly. With the first 2 to 3 weeks, you'll lose a lot of weight. A big portion of that is water. Not all of it, but a lot of it's water, because when we store carbohydrate, we store a lot of water along with those carbs. So as your body gets rid of that stored carbohydrate, all the water goes with it. And so it's actually very, very normal to lose rapidly and then slow down. That's normal. So people don't have to worry that they're doing something wrong or it's not working anymore. You have to expect that it's going to slow down after that initial drop. But when it's been several weeks or several months without any change, then maybe it's a stall. And so stalls are not measured in days. If it's only been a few days and you haven't lost weight, that's not a stall. Um, and people have to be aware that your scale weight is not always the best way to determine what's going on, because it's actually pretty common for your scale weight to stay the same, even though your size and shape are changing. You could be getting smaller even if the scale isn't changing at all or changing a lot less than you think it should. So always pay attention to how your clothing fits. Some people choose to take their measurements once a month or twice a month. Um, and then something else people really need to really appreciate how true this is your scale weight fluctuates from day to day. It's going to be up and down anywhere from 2 to 3 or 4 pounds. That's I forget how many kilos that is, 1 to 2 kilos
Yeah.
between from day to day. Do they do kilos in India or pounds?
Yes,
Probably.
kilos.
Yeah.
Kilos.
So only in America we do the stupid pounds and feet and all this. So it's very normal for your weight to fluctuate a little bit. What you have to look at is the long-term trend over time. So if you weigh yourself every day, just understand that you're going to see little variations up and down, and that's mostly water weight. It's not body fat. Your scale weight is not your body fat.
Because this is, I think, something that plagues everybody. And there's a point where someone says, what am I doing wrong? Do I have to reduce the quantity of my food? And all of these questions start popping up. There's another pretty common thought process and question that I often face is there's something called homeostasis, stasis, I would say, homeostasis. So, does your body kind of recognize that you are eating automatically? You're eating less. You're following a particular intermittent fasting style. You're doing a particular style of eating, and therefore, over a period of time, that it kind of stabilizes and just comes to a stage where it adapts to whatever you're doing and stays stable. I hope I put that question right.
Yeah, I think I understand. And I have to apologize. I live in an apartment building and there's some noise outside. I hope the camera's not picking it up, but
No, no,
okay, good,
definitely
good.
not.
I think they're mowing the lawn or something outside. So I do think there is a point where your body levels out. And if you want to go further, you have to make a change because and I can't say for sure why that happens. It could be just homeostasis or your body just coming to a point where if you want to lose even more weight, or if your blood sugar maybe is still high but it's been the same for a while and you want to bring it down, you have to do something else than what you've been doing. Because let's say you start out with 50 extra kilos to lose, or your blood glucose is, in the US it could be 200, there I don't know, 6 or 7 millimolar. I don't know the conversions in my head, but um, let's say you do keto or low carb for 6 months or a year and you get most of the way to where you want to go, but you're still not all the way there. Your body and your state of health is so different than it was when you started, that what you need to do now to get you that last little bit might be different from what worked a year ago or 6 months ago when you were so much sicker and so much heavier. So I do think people just shouldn't be afraid to change. And I know we all get into that with this way of eating. When something's working, we do it. And even when it stops working so well, we're so afraid to try something different because it was working so well. But I think there's nothing wrong with changing things up. And sometimes you have to change things if you want to get to another goal.
So, when you're talking about changing things, what would be the things that you would change? Ideally, what would it be? Would it just be macros, or would it be an overall look about what you're doing? What would be the actual changes?
So it depends on what somebody's doing now. If so, with with fat loss specifically and trying to get more fat loss, one of the biggest things that helps people sometimes is actually eating a little bit less fat. Because one of the sort of very common things we see in keto is just people simply eating too much fat. Now, we love to eat fat. We celebrate that finally there's a way of eating where we can enjoy fatty, rich foods, but there is such a thing as too much. If you're already struggling to lose the excess fat from your body, then you can't eat an unlimited amount of fat from your food, because your body will just burn that fat instead of turning to its stored fat. So that's one thing, is changing those macros, going a little lower in fat, sometimes a little higher in protein. Very often people are just eating more carbs than they realize. So if they're just having a little too much carbohydrate to really keep themselves in a good fat burning state, Those are the two most common things, is just really making sure your carbs are very low and not overdoing too much fat.
Now, does stress also play a role in this?
I think it does. I think when somebody is having a hard time losing fat, always look at the diet first, because that's the main factor. But if the diet is already looking really good, then stress, I think, definitely can play a role, because when you're chronically stressed, it affects the way your body handles glucose, and it affects your insulin sensitivity. So even if you're eating the same foods, eating good low carb foods, the way your body's sort of processing them can be different. And the cortisol, all the stress hormones are high. Your body's priority is not going to be getting rid of excess weight.
Okay. So basically, then, if someone is on a low carb or if somebody is doing keto for weight loss, it is ideal that they manage this stress some way or the other. Or it could aggravate, or would it end up with them gaining some weight? Is that something that stress can do?
It can, if yes, usually, how should I say this? Mostly because many people, when they're under stress, will eat more. We tend to want to eat, and especially, what do we crave when we're under stress? We crave sugar and starch. Yeah, nobody craves salmon. Nobody craves asparagus when we're really stressed out. We crave sugar and starch. So that can definitely do it. I think even if you're not reaching for the carbs, though, I would say it's unlikely that stress would make you gain a lot of weight, but it would probably make it more difficult to lose any.
Um, I've kind of seen, in the past couple of years that I've interacted with people, I've seen a difference between how the men and the women respond. Um, I've seen men, you know, barely taking any effort to lose, let's say, 10 kilos or 22 pounds, but at the same time, women really struggle. Something that takes men a couple of months takes women at least 4 to 5 months. So, what is it around play over here? Is it what's so different over here that the results are pretty different for both men and women?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone really knows why, except it's got to be hormonal, but it's definitely true that men tend to lose fat much more easily than women do. And it's very likely hormonal. I mean, just having testosterone, even a man who's out of shape and doesn't exercise still tends to have more muscle mass than a woman. And just having that muscle mass means your metabolic rate is probably a little bit higher. And I think also just women, especially at any age, but women of reproductive age with the menstrual cycle, or every month we have a little bit of shift. And then after menopause, it can get even harder. I really think it's hormonal, but something else that is very common, and it affects women much, much more than men, is low thyroid. And if your thyroid hormones are not at the best levels for your individual body, it can be very, very hard to lose weight, because thyroid really controls your metabolic rate. So if your thyroid hormones are a little low, your whole body is just going to be slower. And of course, the rate at which your body burns through energy is going to be low. And it's very upsetting. But yeah, women, don't compare yourself to a man. If your husband or your brother or your son or someone else in your life is doing keto and it's working faster for them, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It just tends to work faster for men.
And does this thing also apply for menopausal women? Because I've seen post-menopause, some women find it really difficult to push that weight out of the system, especially if they've been overweight for quite a while. And, some women not just have been overweight, but they've actually thrashed their metabolism with really bad food habits and all of that. So, For women who have entered menopause and who are looking to take up low carb, does this slow down the effect?
Um, yes, but it slows down the effect of any diet. That's not specific to keto. Like women post menopause, it just is a lot harder to lose weight. And I think that also is hormonal, obviously. I mean, it's such a huge hormonal change. That's one aspect. But another aspect too is that women, I think, like you said, and this is more common in women than men, we are more likely to have a history of chronic dieting and losing weight, gaining it, losing that yo-yo pattern. And so your metabolism is going to be primed to just want to save calories because it doesn't know when you're going to let it eat again more food on a regular basis. So I think that harms the metabolism long term. But I also think women don't appreciate how important it is to have some muscle mass. And it doesn't mean you don't have to be a bodybuilder, you don't have to be aiming to be on a magazine cover, but the more muscle is metabolically active, it's metabolically expensive. It costs energy just to have muscle on you. So the more muscle you can build, the higher your metabolic rate is going to be. And I just think as young women, most women are not in the habit of getting strong. So it's and the older we get, the harder it is. So I think if you're, but it's never too late. It's never too late to start trying to build some muscle for yourself. And that's not the only thing that can help. But if you are post menopause and you're struggling, you tend to just have to be a lot stricter with the diet. So keto will still work, but you can't mess around. You really have to be strict with it.
And to get this metabolism going, especially for people, for women post menopause, would exercise help to some extent? Something like just a cardio, or would you recommend slightly higher rate of exercise, something that can help them not maybe build new muscle, but at least preserve their current muscle mass and make it easier for them to be in a better shape as they grow older?
I think any movement is better than none. So walking is great. I mean, walking is not really going to build muscle at all, but it's very good for just insulin sensitivity and glucose handling. Most people with diabetes, if they measure their blood sugar, they know that if they go for a walk after a meal, their blood sugar comes down better than if they would just sit and watch TV or something after the meal. So I do think that sort of activity is very good for all that. But I think it is important to build the muscle. And I hate saying that because I hate lifting weights. I don't like it, but I think it's important. I wish it wasn't, but I think it's really a big part of the puzzle. But I do think higher intensity cardio activity can, I think, help probably help a little bit boosting the fat loss, and in the period after, not just during the exercise, but for a longer period after, your metabolism is going to be a little bit higher the more intense you do.
Also, there have been cases where somebody's done keto, low carb for a period of time. They've seen some amazing improvements in their health. And for some reason, they go off it. And then when they restart, they see that the progress or the drop in weight is not the same as it was before. So, what change happens in the second time around? Why is it that it becomes a little bit more difficult?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it depends on the situation. Sometimes if you've only been off for a few days or a few weeks, your body is probably still somewhat adapted to lower carb. So when you get back to it, you're not necessarily going to have that big drop of weight again, like you did the very first time you did it. It's just kind of like you're just getting back to where you were. Um, Sometimes you might just be older. If it's been 2 or 3 years since the first time you did keto. Your body's different. You're a little bit older. Probably the most common reason I would think is that when you're brand new, most people are very conscientious about sticking to a particular plan and being very disciplined and being very careful about what they're doing. Whereas maybe when you go back to it the second or third or fourth time, you kind of think you know what to do. You're like, oh, I know. And so you're more casual about it, and you're probably just not quite as strict as you were the first time. That's probably the most common reason.
Okay. And in terms of women, again, going back to the question of women, because I find this pretty common. Now, there are quite a few rising cases of PCOS in women. Can you shed some light on how low carb actually helps with PCOS? Does it really help? And what actually is happening? What has PCOS got to do with why we follow low carb?
Right. So PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome, just to start off with something really interesting for people, one of the drugs, at least in the US, one of the drugs prescribed for women with PCOS is metformin. Metformin is a diabetes drug. So right there, we know there must be some relationship between PCOS and diabetic issues. I mean, they're giving you a diabetes drug for a condition that is not diabetes, although some people actually call PCOS diabetes of the ovaries. So PCOS is very, very much caused by chronically high insulin. And I don't use that word lightly, the word caused. Like in so much of nutrition and medical research, they use the word associated. Something is associated with something else. They have actually said in the medical literature that chronic hyperinsulinemia, chronically high insulin, is the cause of PCOS. And it has to do with how insulin affects all the other hormones, including luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone and testosterone, all of the things that are out of balance in a woman with PCOS. And something important to know is that it it's separate from body weight. We tend to stereotype that women with PCOS are heavier, and only about 50% of the women with PCOS are overweight. Plenty of them are at normal weight. And because you can have this chronically high insulin problem even if you don't have excess body weight. And low carb can be very helpful because it corrects the high insulin. And once you correct the insulin, all of the other hormone levels start to normalize. And Dr. Westman, my co-author on the book End Your Carb Confusion, did some research studies on ketogenic diets for PCOS, and the results were dynamite. I mean, these women, the changes in the blood work in just a few weeks were dynamite. Two of the women who had been unsuccessful in the past at fertility treatments, in vitro fertilization, they were not successful. They conceived, they got pregnant naturally during the ketogenic diet. So it's a really powerful thing to do if you have PCOS. I don't know why it's not the first number one recommendation made to women with this condition.
I think the most likely explanation for that would be the connection between insulin resistance and PCOS. I don't think people really connect both of these two, and that's the reason. I think
Yeah.
even for diabetes, for that matter, it's not very often that they recommend low carb. It's only now that people are offering it. The American Diabetes Association has just now said that it can be made a treatment or an option to be taken. So yeah, we're hoping it'll improve and it becomes
Yeah.
more common.
Yeah, well,
Well,
because PCOS, it affects so many things. It does affect fertility if a woman is hoping to have children. The skin, women get acne. There's all sorts of other problems with it, but I mean the facial hair, and it's such an easy, or not easy, it's simple. It's such a simple remedy. Just change your diet. You don't need all kinds of drugs. And there's women who are going for very, very expensive, invasive fertility treatments and hormone treatments that are completely unnecessary. It's really unfortunate.
Right, true, right, true. So, if you would have to give a general guideline in terms of, let's say, managing all of these, be it PCOS or for weight loss, what would you kind of say? What do you think would be the ideal foods that you would suggest for weight loss? Or another question I would like to also ask is, does dairy or nut kind of hamper weight loss progress, or is it okay to have those?
I will answer in a sec. I just want to let people know in the chat, I put a link to a blog post I wrote about PCOS and the role of the high insulin in driving PCOS, so they can just look at that.
Brilliant.
I don't think there's really any ideal food for weight loss. I think the number one thing is to stay away from the carbohydrate. Once that's done, once your carbs are really, really low, whatever works. I mean, I think um, I think too many people in the keto world, especially women, have become afraid of protein. So don't be afraid of the animal proteins of, lamb or seafood or poultry, or, if you don't eat beef, there's eggs, there's so many other options that are totally fine. You can do low carb or keto as a vegetarian. So if you don't want to eat meat, you can make this work. Um, Dairy is an interesting issue. Some people some people seem to be sensitive to dairy in a way that affects weight apart from its calories or its fat content. Because I think for most people, if they cut out dairy and they find that they start losing weight after being stalled, it may not be that the dairy itself was a problem, but when they cut out dairy, now they're not eating cheese and butter and heavy cream and cream cheese. And these are very, very high fat, high calorie items. And we hate the C word. We don't like to say calorie, but it does matter. You can't eat an unlimited amount of fat and calories and expect to lose your body fat. So I think that's the main thing that happens when people cut out the dairy, is they're just eating a lot less fat. But I do acknowledge there might be people that are sensitive to some compound in dairy that's affecting their body, totally unrelated to the fat and the calories in it.
Now, when we get on to this lower I mean, I know we don't follow the the CIC or the calorie theory at all, because it doesn't make sense. But I think somewhere in the equation, there is a bit amount of calorie, like exactly you said, you eat more than what your body actually needs, you end up storing it. But what about if I eat less? Because typically in a ketogenic or a low carb methodology, you end up eating less. And as time progresses and as you get adapted to fat burning, you need very little food. So, doesn't that kind of make it very low calorie intake? And then doesn't that end up screwing up your metabolism over a period of time? What's your view on that?
That's a really good question. So I think on many other kinds of diets, I should say lower calorie diets where you're deliberately restricting your food, metabolic rate does tend to slow down. We see this in the research.
Mhm.
Except on very low carb diets, the research indicates that your metabolic rate actually increases a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. So when you lose the weight in a ketogenic way, we don't have the same metabolic slowdown that we see in other diets. And I think it's because on low carb or keto, when we eat less, it tends to be because we're honestly naturally less hungry, because we're tapping into fat. So when you are adjusted to burning fat, then even when you're not actually eating food, your body is eating. It's eating its stored fat. So at the cellular level, your body is getting calories, it is getting nutrients. So I think your body doesn't perceive a starvation because it's eating its own fat. And I think So if you do have to eat fewer calories in order to lose weight, one of the where is that? That sounds like it's coming from my computer now, that noise. Oh, I hope you're not hearing a noise, are you? Okay, good.
I can hear it.
Okay, it just stopped. I don't know what it was. Okay, anyway, on keto, so even if you do have to eat less, one of the nice things about keto is that you eat less without deliberately restricting yourself. You're eating less because your appetite is so well controlled, either by being in a state of ketosis tends to suppress the appetite, or just being off that blood sugar roller coaster. When your blood sugar is more even throughout the day, you don't get these wild cravings or this urgent sense of hunger. So I think if you are eating less because you're really just not that hungry, that's different than really being hungry but not letting yourself eat because you want to lose weight. So now there is such a thing though as that metabolic slowdown. And when you lose weight, you will require less food. You're just not as big a person. If you're a smaller person, you do need less food to keep you going. But I think the slowdown happens when you eat far too few calories for a long period of time. So not just for a few days or weeks, a longer period of time. And especially some people will over exercise. There is such a thing as too much with anything, too much fasting, too much exercise. And when you demand too much of your body without fueling it properly, of course it's going to slow you down so that you don't burn out. But I think for most people that are wanting to lose fat on keto, worrying about that metabolic slowdown is not something they need to think about that much.
Okay. That's actually heartening to know, because I think even for me that's been a question for a very long time, because we speak about metabolic slowdown on the other side, but when it comes to keto, we do so much of fasting. We eat. I mean, I actually end up eating pretty less. Um, just have two meals, and they're less. Sometimes they're less than even 1,000 calories. It's just a mental calculation, and you feel that I'm actually full and I can't eat even one spoon beyond this. So the question that I always had was, over time, won't it actually slow down? But it's heartening to know that it does actually improve the metabolism and not slow it down.
Yeah, and I think when your body needs more calories, it will tell you. You'll be hungrier. And that's, people need to know that it's okay to eat. There's so much emphasis on fasting now, and fasting can be helpful, but the nice thing about low carb is that, like I said, when you're off that blood sugar roller coaster, you can more easily trust the signals your body's giving you. If you feel hungry, it's okay to eat. You don't have to fast. You don't have to force yourself to go hungry. So you will probably get to a point where your appetite is a little bigger.
I think at the end of the day, it comes to that we really need to understand our bodies and understand the signals that it's giving us, rather than just go with habit or be scared of eating food. Thanks, Amy. Now, a little bit about your book. The latest one in your that you've written is The Stall Slayer. So, if you could just share with our audience a bit more about the book, what made you write it, and what does it talk, and maybe if it's available on Amazon, or if it's just
Yeah,
available.
the book is called The Stall Slayer, and it's about specifically breaking these fat loss stalls on low carb and ketogenic diets. And I think it's available in India. I'm pretty sure. Check the local Amazon site. I know it is available in several countries outside the US. Um, if you can't find it, you can go to stallslayer.com and you can download the PDF. You can just download the electronic copy. But yeah, you know, you probably come across this all the time as a nutritionist who's low carb focused. difficult fat loss is one of the most common reasons people come to us for help. And instead of writing out the same answer to 100 emails, I just put all the information in this book. And people can just buy the book and get all the potential tips they need. And we have just actually, I'm going to put a link in the chat. We just started a course. There's an online course that is coming available for sale tomorrow, March 25th. I'm going to put that link in there right now. Yeah, it's an online course based on breaking fat loss dolls on keto. And it's video based, it's self-paced, so you can do it from anywhere in the world. It's videos with me walking you through all of the different reasons for stubborn fat loss and what to do about them. And let's see, what else? The course is available for sale from March 25th through the 29th. So it's only available for purchase for 5 days. Once you buy it though, then you can go through the videos anytime you like. You can as slowly or as quickly as you like. You can watch them more than once. So and I think it goes beyond the diet. There's definitely some dietary factors, but the book, there's a whole chapter, and in our course, there's an entire lesson on thyroid, stress and sleep, intermittent fasting, exercise. It covers everything. And let's see. Yeah, I think it's educational, even if you're not having trouble losing fat. There's just, I think, good information in there. And you might not be in a fat loss stall now, but maybe you will be sometime in the future. And knowing this information will help you then.
I think it does definitely help to have that hand holding. Like you said, there are lots of people who start off really great, but 6 months, 1 year down the lane, they just see that slowdown, the stall, and they don't realize what could be going wrong or what they should be correct. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. I think those are my questions that I wanted to ask you. I think we'll just open it up for the Q&A now. Shashi,
if anyone just doesn't see the chat, the website for that course is adaptyourlifeacademy.com, and just click on the stall slayer. It's really adaptyourlifeacademy.com. It's a long name.
It's open now for question and answer from the participants.
Yes. So
something we should emphasize, and I talk about this in the book and in the course. Even when you're having a very hard time losing weight, as long as you're eating a healthy diet, as long as you're keeping the carbs low, good things are happening on the inside. So, right, we know the blood sugar gets better, the blood pressure, triglycerides, all of this wonderful stuff happens. So, try not to focus. I know everybody just wants to lose weight, I know, but don't ignore all of the other positive things that are happening. Joint pain goes away, acid reflux tends to go away, brain fog, all of these good things happen. And so try to pay attention to those things. Those can keep you motivated to keep going when the scale is not moving.
I think this is a pretty relevant point. And I would say it's very important because we're all chasing that one number on the scale. We all are behind that number. And I think personally in my journey, plus what I talk to when I talk to people, what I say is it's okay to be, let's say, 5 to 6 kilos above your ideal weight. But then what matters more is your other health markers. Are you sleeping well? Are you having less inflammation? Is your stomach all right? Are your lipid markers great? I think those definitely do matter more than, just worrying a bit about that 5-6 kilos of being slightly above your ideal weight.
Right. Yeah. And yes, I totally agree. And something that we really have to understand, women more so than men, just because of women's mindset around weight.
I think I would say conditioning rather than the mindset. Yes. There's a lot of conditioning and pressure.
Yeah. But if your weight, if your size is not interfering with your mobility or your quality of life, then it's really just vanity, which is fine. Vanity is not a bad thing, but understand that, okay, I'd like to lose 2 or 4 or 6 kilos, but I'm perfectly healthy. I feel well, and I just want to look different. That's fine if that's your goal, but I really encourage people not to have a goal weight, because you might get there, you might reach that weight and still be unhappy with your physique, with how you look. I mean, that's really what we all have a goal appearance. We don't have a goal weight. We don't really care what the scale says. We care how we look and how we feel in our bodies. And it's very, very possible to be a few pounds or a few kilos above your goal or your ideal weight, but you might be perfectly happy with how you look and feel. And I hate for people to chase a number on the scale that is completely arbitrary.
So I think we have one question out here in the chat box. Does coffee cause a hormonal imbalance in women? If it does, what's your recommendation for coffee?
I am a coffee lover. I have not heard of it causing any hormonal imbalances. If anything, most of the research seems to show that it can help with fat loss. I'm not concerned about coffee at all. Maybe I should be, but no, I haven't found it to be a problem at all for most people. Now, if you're putting 4 tablespoons of butter or ghee or MCT oil in it every day, then that might be a problem if you're trying to lose fat, but the coffee itself is okay.
Yeah, so going to that, I mean, there is a whole horde of keto community and low carb community that speaks so much about bulletproof coffee, adding in ghee, adding in butter, saying that it accelerates weight loss. Does it really do that? Or could that be the one causing a stall actually?
It actually could be true depending on the situation. I find very often it does contribute to stalls, because that could be a 400 or 500 calorie cup of coffee. And you're thinking it's a beverage, it's a drink, and you don't realize quite how much fat is in there. And again, your body's going to burn that fat rather than your body fat. So that is a big reason. And most people don't particularly want a fatty coffee. They think they're supposed to have it, or they've read it online that you have to have a fatty coffee for keto, and you really don't. But in the other aspect, if somebody has that and that helps them reduce calories elsewhere, I think it can help for some people. So some people will have a fatty coffee and consider themselves to still be fasting. I don't buy into that, but I do think if that coffee replaces a meal or 2 meals that would be even higher in fat, I do think it can help. But there's nothing magical about the coconut oil or the butter in the coffee. It's that's just helping you go longer without eating other things.
We have one question here from Pramila, who's asking, if someone does ketogenic diet for a few months and then wants to get off it for a while, what's the best way to maintain the weight while increasing the carb allowances?
Oh, good question. I happen to have my book right here. I co-wrote a book with Dr. Eric Westman, and it's called End Your Carb Confusion. We cover this exact issue because as wonderful as keto is, not everybody needs strict keto, and many people get great results with keto, but then they're doing fine and they get to a point where they want to start eating a little bit more carbohydrate. So the way that we talk about doing that is increase your carbs very gradually. Don't all of a sudden one day have 100 grams of carbs out of nowhere. We recommend about 5 grams a week of increasing. So that could be a quarter cup of berries. It could be, you could reintroduce yogurt if you're not already eating yogurt. So very small amounts gradually. And so that way you can identify your own threshold of how much carbohydrate can I have and still maintain the weight that I've lost, or, you know, keep all my health problems from coming back. It's just really doing it slowly. And I think there are certain foods that are probably better to reintroduce first than others. So things like berries or the plain yogurt. Start maybe things like carrots and beets, if you're not already eating those foods, those sort of starchier vegetables. And then I would do grains and sugars last.
Okay. So it's okay, you're saying, when you introduce a little bit of grains as a higher carb allowance?
Yeah, depending on somebody's tolerance and sensitivity, because if somebody's very, very active and athletic, they can tolerate more carbohydrate. And not only tolerate it, they might actually feel better. And plenty, you know, we have professional athletes doing low carb diets, so you don't need the carbohydrate, but some people just feel better with more carbs when they're that active. But you know, we've really demonized carbohydrate a little too much in the low carb world, because there are billions of healthy people around the planet who eat fruit and they eat beans and they eat grains. So clearly this stuff all by itself is not poison. It's all about the context. So I do think grain can be included, just depends on the person's situation.
All right. Okay, if any other questions, if anyone has, maybe you could type or they could just ask out here. Unmute yourself and you could ask yourself, you could ask a question. Okay.
I have a question for you. In the US, we are now starting to see a lot of keto products, like mass manufactured products that are is that happening in India or not yet?
Not yet, but somewhere as part of a community and from my own personal experience, I've always felt that it's better to depend less on any processed food or any factory packaged food, unless of course it is, let's say, a cheese, something like that, which you obviously can't make at home, or you can, but you just don't have the time to make at home. You know, it's stuff like that, yes, but as long as there is less amount of processing, we haven't yet. But then slowly it is getting introduced. Keto is now the magic word in the health community. So there are a lot of people slowly getting into it. But then a few of them, they just use the keto word based just on the macro. It fits into the macro and therefore it is keto, and just get away with it. But people like us, when we just take a closer look at the ingredient, we realize that, you know, that's definitely not what they're saying. The two different things.
Same here. Now, I think some of the products are really not suitable, but some, I mean, it's very nice to see at the regular supermarkets here, the regular grocery store, you can buy the pre-made zucchini noodles or the cauliflower rice. That, you never saw that 10 years ago. So those, I mean, at least it's real food. It's just prepared for you. I think those are, it's convenient, and I think it makes this way of eating a lot easier for some people to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that other stuff is very questionable.
Yes. So it does become a challenge sometimes, because we're so used to eating a particular style of diet that has quite a bit of snacking around it. While not everybody does eat so much of processed food or the westernized kind of food, but then there is an Indian system of snacks and a different kind of high carbohydrate food. So the challenge is when someone switches on or switches off to keto, somebody who's not aware of how this works, they're just picking up information off the internet, they end up looking for such snacks and such small bites, which is sold. But then a closer look really tells you that's because you do see a lot of ingredients like wheat gluten, modified starch, even soybean oil, or other refined oils, which on a low carb we definitely stay away from. We don't want gluten to affect us. We don't want the soybean oil in our diet. We don't want any of those refined oils in our diet. So unfortunately, the general population is not very aware of all that. So
Yeah, and the thing is, we tend to badmouth snacking on keto, like you should just have your meals and you shouldn't be hungry in between. I think it's okay to snack if you need to snack, but snacks can be real food, just smaller amounts. You can have chicken for a snack. You can have sardines or fish as a snack. You can have eggs for a snack, just have less than you would have for a meal. People don't realize that a snack is just a very small meal. It doesn't have to be this special snacky food.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So it's quite a bit about getting into the right mindset and understanding really how food works and how our body is designed to get into the proper concept of low carb and sustain it. You know.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I think we don't see any questions. There aren't anything. So I think it's been a pretty great conversation, actually, Amy. A lot of the questions that I had asked you are certain questions or certain issues that I have faced myself. And I was actually looking forward to connecting in this and asking you all of those questions.
Anjali, can I put in a question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
May I know who this is?
I am Pramila here, Pramila
Yes.
Mundra.
Yes, please go ahead, Pramila.
Yeah. So my question is, if somebody switches over to a ketogenic diet for the first time and they have issues with sleep, though they are having 3 meals a day and they are having the enough carb allowance, but they need to lose weight. But then they are so used to having carbohydrate that they don't get enough sleep, or I'm not sure whether it's psychologically affecting them and they're not able to get good sleep. Is there any suggestion for that on how to counter it?
So this is somebody that's having trouble falling asleep and staying asleep, right?
Yeah.
Okay. A couple of different recommendations. Sometimes it just eventually their body will adjust and they'll be able to sleep. They just have to get used to it. But sometimes having this is going to be very shocking to people, but sometimes having a little bit of food at night before bed can help you sleep. Again, we're so enamored with fasting in the keto world, but some people really have a hard time sleeping if they're hungry or if they're just a little jittery, and sometimes having just a little bit, one hard-boiled egg or 1 or 2 ounces of cheese before bed can help calm that. Sometimes magnesium supplementation is usually recommended for sleep, and it's hard to recommend anything. I mean, usually about 300 or 350 milligrams per day of magnesium, but yeah, make sure this person is not on any medication. Sometimes keto can affect the way your body handles certain medications. So if there's a medication that has a side effect of insomnia that the person didn't have a problem with before, but once they switch to a ketogenic diet, they might have effects from medicines that they weren't having before, because it just changes the way your body deals with the drugs so drastically. But it's
yeah,
more
she's
likely,
taking thyroid medication.
Food at night. Sorry.
So the person concerned is under thyroid medication. So does that affect?
Yes. So this person should get blood work done again. But if for many people, keto helps correct thyroid problems. Not everybody, but if keto is helping to correct that, and they're also taking medication, she might be having almost an overactive thyroid, which definitely can interfere with sleep. She might be feeling warm. She might be having heart palpitations. Look at the symptoms of overactive thyroid. And if she's having any of those, she would need to start working on cutting back the medication under medical supervision.
Okay.
Yeah. I wish I have low thyroid. Keto did not fix me, but for some people, it does correct thyroid problems.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? All right. I think that was it. Let me just quickly look at the chat box. There are no questions here. All right. So I think we can close the session. We can close the recording. Thank you once again, Amy. It was a pleasure having you here. It was lovely hearing about the most vexing thing, the stall in someone's ketogenic low carb journey. Thank you so much for answering our questions. And Shashi, I think we can stop our recording right now.